Hi, everybody. This is Workgroup Device Management's meeting on native resources in DRA for February 10th. Go ahead, Praveen. I'll make you co-presenter. If I can find you on this long list of people. Okay, all yours.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to give an update on the CAP itself. Uh, we had some discussions like last week as a part of like SIGARC and even SIG scheduling community meetings. Uh, okay, I just see that like Dominic has also reviewed the CAP. Basically, we uh, reduce the scope of the cap mostly to reduce the complexity on the scheduler side and also give some more time to uh, discuss like things around the accounting policies and what are the different accounting policy that we want to support and things like that. Even on the node side, like the current scope in alpha, it continues to target only the API changes and the scheduler side of the changes. uh, so I can just give like uh, a overview of the changes itself. Um, on the API side, this is what the current proposal is. Like earlier, we had two different accounting policies and also some more policies like listed as future enhancement. So we decided to like cut that down. So we now only have like one policy. Like basically, we don't have a field for mentioning the accounting policy. So it kind of defaults to only one policy where uh, we have this field in the device class which says like if the device manages native resource or not. And on the device we continue to have the mapping for deriving how the native resource quantity can be derived from the resource claim and the device allocated to the resource claim. So now the default policy would be like in the pod spec, like for containers which references claims, uh, whatever resource is requested to like within the claim adds to whatever is requested in the spec. So basically for the pod footprint, when we compute the total like resource needed for the pod, we go over like the container requests and we go over the claims within the pod and sum them up together, and that would be considered like when we are accounting for like how much resources is consumed on the node by this pod, like including the resource claim. So yeah, this is the API on the device and the device class side. And on the pod side, yeah, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to just give a little context to back it up for 1 second. So, um, yeah, the scope was big before, and it was pretty complicated. And so the approach we're taking now is to just try to make some progress forward and try to do it in a way that's as simplified as possible. So what that means is that kind of overall, the way to think about it is like when you specify um, the pod, a lot of what this kept was about was like trying to figure out the relationship between the container spec resource specifications, the pod spec resource specifications, and the new place to put it, which is in the claim specifications, and how those things would all work together. And so what this cap now does is say basically if you give the if you give pod level resources, those take precedence. They become the full shape of the pod, and anything coming out of a container spec or a claim just gives us information on how to allocate, how to like make use of what the overall pod level resources have declared as the overall shape of the pod. If you don't specify pod level resources, then we infer or we calculate the overall footprint of the pod from the container specs and the claims. And so that's kind of the overall message, like ignoring glazing over all the details. Like that's the kind of overall approach here in this. And then on the claim side of like how to specify, we just went with the simplest thing we could do so that we can make progress right now. So that's the context, I guess. So you can continue, Praveen. I just wanted to make sure people
Yeah, I think thanks for
before they got into the details.
yeah, thanks for adding that. So um yeah, I think like on the this is on the device side, on the pod side, like it hasn't changed too much. So we would still like the scheduler would still record whatever resources that it allocated to the claim within the pod status. And currently this would be used in kubelet like when we are doing admission control to figure out or do the secondary check to figure out if the pod fits on the node or not. But going forward, like the plan is kubelet will look at this and it would use in like the information in the pod status to compute or do the node level enforcement things like QoS or like C group and eviction preemption, like a lot of things on the node like uh is based on QoS, and even the C group configuration needs to look at like now it needs to look at pod spec, and along with that it needs to look at pod status to get the overall footprint and do the accounting or do the enforcement on the node side. Yeah, I think John already covered that. So if pod level resources are specified, that would take the highest precedence, and we need this validation. We added this validation like within the dynamic resources plugin to make sure like once a claim is allocated, the overall limit or like yeah the overall limit within the pod level resources and like basically the sum of all the requests made at the container level does not exceed what is specified at the pod level. And if in case the validation fails within the dynamic resources plugin, we reject the pod. So currently with pod level resources, we do the validation at the admission level to make sure the container request does not exceed the pod level request. But since with DRA, like we can only after allocation we would know like what claims get allocated and what is the native resource quantity allocated to that claim. We need the additional like validation even on the scheduler side. So yeah, at a high level, like those are like the changes proposed in this KEP. Like yeah, any questions around the changes? So that's yeah, Sergey.
Yeah, it's not a question about changes. I just wanted to, I'm being a little late, maybe you already covered it. I wanted to ask what the relationship between DRA plugin as we have today, where you need to manually understand like match resources between containers, pods, and like basically pod spec and DRA claims, and this cap. The way I see it is what we have today when you need to manually construct pod spec to be consistent with claims is very flexible. You can literally express anything. You can have shared claims and like make it responsibility of a pod author to understand how shared claims match into native resources in pod spec. You can do like you can work around any limitation by because you are so flexible. You basically saying that pod spec explaining consumption and CPU assignment is explained by DRA. So you don't have any magic happening. With this cap, we do magic, but at the same time, we limit some scenarios. So like we don't know how to support shared claims, for instance, or we don't know how to support some pod level resources with fungibility. So it's kind of experimental cap to see if every scenario possible can be expressed with this new API, or like most of scenarios at least. So I wanted to understand how we see the relationship between those two, and can we enable first one when user is responsible but very flexible, while working on this cap?
Um, yeah, I think like the things that you mentioned, like so basically currently how we make sure within this is very specific to CPU DRA driver. So currently how we make sure like what we request through claim uh like is accounted for is by duplicating the request claim request in the container request so that scheduler knows like how much CPU we are requesting and even kubelet knows how much CPU we are requesting. I think that is currently done because we do not have this kept, and the biggest like concern there is uh like the fungibility side, like that is one of the things like that this kept like tries to address. So basically if we have like a claim where you have a list of devices and one of them is a native resource, with the current approach like within like what we have in the DRA like CPU DRA driver, it does not let us like, or there is no way to express this the fungibility part of it. So yeah, I think that is something that this kept can solve. So yeah, and also like the current approach is very specific to the CPU DRA driver. So I'm not exactly sure like how memory DRA driver is trying to solve like similar problems, but this kept like targets like uh, any native resource DRA driver in general, and also the auxiliary resource use cases where you could have like a GPU device which requests for like additional CPUs or memory and things like that. So I think fungibility, auxiliary device, those are the two main use cases that this KEP can try and solve, along with like being like a more general approach that any new native resource DRA driver can like use.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not arguing with that. Sorry for
mhm,
interrupting. I'm not arguing with that. I see a value of a cap. I'm not trying
mhm.
to say there is no value. I'm trying to say that this cap and API comes with limitations. And those limitations may be alpha limitations. It may spill over into beta. It may never be solved. So my ask here, like how we can formulate the cap and such a way that we allow old style, like existing style, matching pod spec to DRA claims. Not matching, like asking customer to match and express what they want to express, very flexible. While when this cap is arrived, when we can express it a little bit differently, maybe easier in some cases, maybe not that flexible in other cases. So if people want flexibility, they still have a DRA driver to play with. If they if new API is expressible enough, then we will suggest to use new API. That's what I'm trying to suggest here.
So yeah, it's really hard, I think, to talk in the abstract. Like I think you might have had some in a document somewhere, Sergey. Like there, like some examples where it would be useful to see some examples where this can't do it, but the old way can, because with the integration of an understanding of pod level resources and letting them set the boundary, and then um, I'm not sure that's still the case that there's things we can't. I saw in you had some examples. You were like, this is much harder
Yeah,
to
one
do.
example may be like big pod with 3 sidecars, and I want these sidecars to share CPU, and so I declare pod level resource, resource for them, and they can share all the CPU among themselves, so like
Yeah, that
memory,
would work with
whatever.
the way with this new cap, right? So that with this new cap, you'd set the pod level resources at, say, uh, 21 CPUs, and then you'd have your primary claim would be for 20 CPUs, and the other ones would just get the rest. I think that would work.
Yeah, I think that that's right. Like you can currently with this cap you can have pod level resources like which includes some of all the claims plus some overhead for all the sidecars. And yeah, it should still work that in a way that like like the containers which wants more granularity can include claims, and the rest of the containers without claims consume out of whatever is remaining within the pod level budget. I think like that should still like work with the current cap.
Okay, yeah, we saw with pod level resources, we may have a scenario around shared claims. Like you can have shared claims declared, and then you can author your pod spec such a way that it will tell scheduler how much it consumes, while some CPUs are still shared. With this API, you may not be able to express it. Like you may need to look at more examples, but that's what I'm trying to ask. Like if we totally sure that all example, like all scenarios are totally covered, like it's fine. But I don't. I think there are scenarios that are not covered.
I think like even I mean with the pod level resources thing, like that should work irrespective of how the claims are shared like between containers within the pod, as long as uh, the pod level budget kind of considers the claims and adds overhead for rest of the sidecar. So I think that should still work irrespective of like if whether each container has its own claim or containers share claims like amongst themselves. So, but I can definitely look at like if there are other cases that may not work and try to include them. But the case that you mentioned, in my opinion, should work. And Dominic?
Dominic, we can't hear you if you're talking.
My connection may be poor, so maybe.
Now it's good.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
So maybe we should simply move the resource claim status, not put it into pod status, but to resource claim status. So that if we have resource claims that are shared between multiple pods, it would be like
You did break up there at the end, but I
more
think
obvious where those resources should be accounted to.
I think that would work for the scheduler, but it might not
So-
work for the kubelet. Kubelet right now doesn't look at resource claims at all, so it will see the pod status, but it won't see the resource claim status. But I don't know, Praveen, is that?
Yeah, I think like that. So we can make it work if we start looking at claims within kubelet, but I don't know if that's the right. I don't know if we want to do that. And the other concern is like now with pod status, we have one place like within the scheduler where we look at the pod, compute the status, and like that gets consumed across multiple places, like for resource fit check and like maybe like kubelet admission QS, like a bunch of places consumes this, but it is computed only once. But including it in the resource claim status would mean that like whatever we are currently doing in the scheduler, it needs to be repeated across like all the consuming components. So I don't know how to make sure like uh they are like synchronous, or basically they're looking at the same thing and taking decisions. So those are the two concerns that I had with like, I mean, those are the reasons why we currently have it in the pod API and not in the resource claim status.
So I'm a little bit concerned about the resource claims that are shared between multiple pods, and if those pods like are, this is out of scope currently.
Yes.
I know, but if they, some pods appear, some disappear, then I'm not sure if it's easy to move this accounting from one pod status to another pod status. I'm not completely understanding the problem, but if I understand correctly, we need to account to some pod the resource claim, shared resource claim resources. So it might be the first one.
Mhm.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like that, the sort of like cardinality relationship. Like maybe it makes sense. Um, I would, I, I guess I would say maybe we can debate this further during implementation. I kind of feel like for a first alpha, putting it in the pod status is okay if we're okay with the field name potentially being burned in that status if we decide it doesn't belong there. Um, the I mean, Francesco put on the chat, right? Like, how much should Kubelet be aware? Like, I think that's an open question that I think Signode needs to kind of make a decision about, or we need to debate there. Like, if you had it in the resource claim status and Kubelet understood that, then Kubelet could understand, oh, there's been 3 pods that are making use of this same thing, and it could understand that set of relationships, right? That triangle, rather than trying to like deduplicate it from one pod or something weird, from 2 pods. Like, so, but is that now that resource claim is V1, maybe that's okay. When we were very deliberate to not have kubelet understand resource claims in the beginning because we didn't want to introduce skew between, additional issues with versioning between the driver and the kubelet and the API server. But now it's a V1 API. Maybe it's not as big of an issue. I don't know. Um, do we need to solve it right now, or are we good with our first alpha? I guess is my point.
Yeah, around like multiple pod sharing claims, I had like more concerns on the node side for how we can even like how we would be able to enforce it even in the future. So I think that needs to be discussed like before or maybe along with when if we decide to move this in the resource claim, because currently my questions are like if a pod
I
references an already
think we
existing
don't
claim,
need
how do we
now.
sorry Dominic, you're breaking up.
I'm just bringing up.
Sorry, Dominic, like I could not hear you. You were breaking up.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything. Please continue.
Okay, I think just continue, Praveen, or if you're done, Francesco can go.
Yeah, I think like for spot sharing claims, my main concern would be on the node side of the enforcement. I think we need more discussion on how we do that or if we want to do that or not. That's the bigger question I had. But yeah, Francesco.
Hey, hello. So, my own very partial and very debatable perspective is that the sharing part, the sharing question, and the kubelet, and partially the kubelet awareness about the DRA resource claim, and basically the whole topic we were tapping into, it could not be really solved in isolation without taking into account what kubelet can enforce. The point I'm trying to make is that my own perception, and I hope I'm wrong actually, is that we cannot really we need to take into account the gaps and what we can implement in the enforcement side, and that drives also how the sharing part takes place. I don't see easily a path on which, okay, we solve at the API level and then we trivially fix the enforcement side. I see the two things go hand in hand, and why and I'm done. My finishing thought will be, I hope I'm wrong, because if I am right, that complicates the matter. It would be much simpler if we can solve one side in isolation and then attack the other. But again, this is my initial take.
Yeah, I agree with Francesco. Like I think we need to consider like both enforcement and like how we handle on the scheduler side, like together, especially for the sharing part.
At this point in time, in the drivers, in the CPU driver, and basically the memory driver follows through the decision we make the CPU driver, we disallow any form of sharing at the driver level. So the driver say, okay, no, you cannot do that. So because we don't have a clear picture about how to implement sharing, and we didn't want to increase the scope, figuring out a way. So at this point in time, the drivers are gonna deny that, but that's of course for because the first alpha.
Yeah, that's everything that I had to share like about the cap. Uh, any more questions on this, or I don't know if there are any other topics.
Well, I guess I would just ask, since Dawn is here, I don't know if Mrinal is here, but like for as a SIG node approver, does this look good? Because we're just up to the deadline and we want to make sure we can on the node side. Dominic, I think already said it looks good on the scheduling side. All right, you don't have to answer now if you need time to think about it. I don't want to put you on the spot.
But at least because we have like the offline discussing it, right? So I actually like the what we have today,
Okay.
narrow down a lot of the scope, and also since we only have the one policy, right? So why don't we just get rid of that additional API change, and we can build from there, right? So we can introduce new stuff. So and also cover large of not all the use cases, but the large use cases would be discussed. And especially yesterday, I reviewed the cloud level resource management. I really feel this new change actually, because that's already complicated. And with this one, actually align with that one and make this even more complicated problem and of the pod. So make the enforcement at node and also the scheduling both actually relatively easier, but still reserve of the possibility extended. But I need to look at the cap in details. So, but from high level, I actually agree. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Then I guess if there's any other comments or discussion, otherwise we can wrap up. And I know I have a lot of KEP still to review, so I don't mind giving half an hour back. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for the feedback.